Every Tuesday night feels like Christmas Eve. Living between Wednesdays.
What's up, folks? I'm your host, Konrad, on Wednesday Night Reviews. And today we are joined live on YouTube by David Quiroz Jr. David, thanks for taking the time.
Absolutely. Thanks a lot for having me on.
For sure. I must admit, I'm very excited. When Nathan originally, was the producer for your book, reached out, I was both intrigued and scared. So your book, of course, is Night of the Chihuahuas. I happen to be a little bit afraid of Chihuahuas just because generally people don't, I think, raise them right, so they get a little vicious. But you've got a whole book about it. So my first easy question I always start with for the folks either tuning in live now or watching this in the future, who is David Quiroz Jr.?
I am a writer, a horror writer based out of Phoenix, Arizona in the US. And I've kind of had a very circuitous route of, I started off in independent filmmaking, working as an assistant in the Hollywood studio system for a little bit, and then kind of realized that my passion lay in just writing and not in filmmaking itself. And so I got a master's degree in professional screenwriting, focused more on that endeavor. And then
Okay.
I've always been a comic book fan. Like, comic books have always been just something that I love dearly. I've got a huge collection, much to my wife's chagrin, and eating up space in our garage and all of the nooks and crannies of our house. You can probably see behind me. And I'd always wanted to write for them, but since my focus had been on film, I'd been so focused on that. And then finally, I had an idea that it was like, we just obviously were never going to get anywhere with it as a film because it was just way too big. We didn't have the resources or the funding to pull it off. And I was working with an artist at the time, and he was like, you need to let me draw this for you. We need to turn this into a comic book. And then once he put that idea in my head, I realized it was like, why hadn't I thought of this before? We sat down, we made Night of the Chihuahuas, and it's been a long process because we didn't have any experience in comic books. So we've been learning as we went along, and we've got our sea legs under us, and the momentum is building on this project with each issue, which is a lot of fun. And it's led me into a lot of other writing endeavors that have been incredibly rewarding as well since the start of this process. So that's a long way of saying I'm a horror writer out of the American Southwest, and just trying to keep relevant,
Absolutely. Well, it's interesting that you mentioned you're part of the film industry, because when I came to basically doing this, I've found a lot of people who do interviews, or rather, sorry, a lot of people who make comics had some connection to film. Like literally last night, I was doing an interview with a gentleman, and he's a scriptwriter for film, and he's been involved in making film. And now here you are. I think before I advance any further questions, I definitely want to ask, what is Night of the Chihuahuas? Can you, for the folks at home who've maybe never heard of it, can you explain what it is?
Yeah. So, Night of the Chihuahuas is a horror comedy concept that I came up with basically as a result of years of rescuing Chihuahuas and always growing up around them and getting bit by many of these little 7-pound dogs that are just full of energy and anger. And I always thought to myself, how terrifying would it be if you could do all the things that you think you could do? You're tiny and you're harmless, but if you could back up this attitude of yours, then the world would be in danger. And so I came up with the concept of, what if a pack of Chihuahuas got a hold of this serum that gives them strength to back up their attitude, and they're attacking a small town in southern Arizona in the middle of the desert, and the police officer whose first day on duty is transferring from a big city to this quiet, what he thinks is going to be a quiet town. He shows up for his first day on duty, finds the town has been almost wiped out completely, and unfortunately for everybody, his greatest fear just happens to be Chihuahuas. So it's up to him to uncover the mystery of what's going on and band together with the remaining survivors and try to figure out who's going to be the reigning king of the food chain.
I love it. That's fascinating. I find it interesting because as someone who obviously I advocate for indie comics all the time. I'm a big dog lover myself. I've always been a fan of, to me, the larger the better, because one, cuddly, but also if they're bigger, you will see and hear them coming, which is why I
Yeah.
think I love Chihuahuas, because they're fast, they're small, and by God, their bites hurt.
Yep, and
Um,
they like to get right at your ankle before you even realize they're about to attack.
Absolutely. But it's interesting because I found a lot of people who are passionate about something like rescuing animals, if they were to turn on and make a comic, they would want to make it basically parallel their adventure. Whereas you're jumping right into like, let's take everything that anyone's ever complained about, let's take the greatest fears of it, and just run with it. Um, I, I guess, when did the idea for Night of the Chihuahuas first sort of start? Like, what event happened that you were like, I could make this into a book?
I think I was in high school at the time, so many, many, many years ago. But I owned this dog named Coco, and she was 17 years old, and she had a little Chihuahua, and she was blind, toothless, but she was still to this day the meanest dog I've ever owned. And even at blind, toothless, and with her joints popping every time she moved, she still like she would claim the couch and curl up in a ball. And if you tried to move her, she would snap and growl and do all. And it was
Ooh.
hilarious because of how little she was. And I remember thinking to myself, like at one point, a friend of mine who came over, and he was even I'm a fairly big guy, and he's bigger than me, and he was terrified of her, and he like wouldn't sit on the couch because she was on the couch. And at one point, like I was like, just move her, and he tried to move her, and she snapped at him, and he drew his hand back. And in that moment, I thought, the way that my mind works is, I thought like, what if she had bitten him and like ripped his hand off or ripped a finger off? And I was thinking like,
Oh,
that idea, that image in my mind was like, it was both terrifying and hilarious. And I was like, there's something here. And then from there, it just kind of went from, why, how would Coco have gotten the power to do that? And then it was like, well, obviously at the time Resident Evil had just come out, and the video game had just come
ah,
out, and I was like, oh, she got a hold of the T virus. And so it sort of progressed from there. It was like, oh, and then what if there were other Chihuahuas who got a hold of the T virus? And why would the T virus be given to Chihuahuas? And my mind just, it didn't stop. It almost wrote itself. It really did.
that's amazing. Like one of the first panels, um, I wonder if I could pull it up. Would you be good if I showed an early chunk of the first
Of
book?
course. Of
All right,
course.
cool. Let me go and pull it up. Well, I've got to get the cover for sure. Share this tab instead. So one, this is the cover of the book. Is this cover A? Because you have a series of variants.
This is our fifth printing, I want to say. We've been doing well enough to where, I'm blown away by the support that we've received. But each printing, we're doing new covers for it. And
Oh,
this,
cool.
we're fortunate enough to, so this is our cover A. This is our standard cover, but it's the, like fifth printing that we've done so far. So that was done by an artist who's local here to Phoenix named Anastasia Still Smoking. And she does it all with charcoal, to where when she gave us the print, like we couldn't move it too much because it was still fresh, and so we had to seal it
Oh,
to make sure
cool.
that the charcoal didn't start smudging and stuff. But like, she's insanely talented, and that was supposed to be her homage to The Shining, with Jack Nicholson coming through the door, but instead of that, it's the Chihuahuas. So
Yeah. Congratulations on a fifth printing, you said?
yeah.
Fifth printing of your first book. Have you subsequently done up to 5 for the second, third, fourth, and so on?
We have kept with the same number. So the covers for the rest of the issues, we've kept the same. So
Okay.
even though we've done more additional print runs of issue number 2, we still are using Fifi, which is the Chihuahua with a severed arm at its feet, and then the Jawawas, which is our homage to Jaws.
Beautiful. I actually, you know what? I'm gonna flip over because I love it. So this would be Fifi.
Yep,
Let's see if I can't zoom in on that a little bit. Which is, I love the, for me that the split jaw is like a Blade reference or maybe a Predator
it is.
reference.
Yep, it's exactly what that is.
I love it.
Yeah,
Um,
it's just supposed to show that the mutation is taking hold on the dogs. And as in the first issue, they look just like regular Chihuahuas, except that they're ripping people apart. And then as the series progresses, the mutations taking hold, and they're still going to stay small, but they just get a little bit crazier looking, letting the
yeah,
artists have some fun with that.
yeah. And then you've got the Jaws one, which
Yeah,
is
there's our Chihuahuas, and then so
fabulous.
every issue we do like a regular cover, and then we do a variant cover that's an homage to a classic movie monster. It has led to some confusion at some of the events that we go to because people were like, "Oh my gosh, so you did about a giant Chihuahua in the ocean?" We're like, "No, no, no. That's just the Chihuahuas are all little and they're on land, but these are just to get people's attention, and they're very effective at getting people to slow down and stop by our booth." So
Oh yeah. Um, like I don't know. These covers are wild, and I also love that you sell them as posters.
yeah.
And like good, like 11 by 17 big posters. Because I could definitely see someone being like, you know what, I don't want to check out the comic, but this image itself is wild, and that way they can have their thing. Although I would say they're very foolish because these comics are really fun. Um, but yes, I did want to show a panel early on. Um, Another thing I had a question about. We've barely touched the story already, but um, the production company is Pork Chop Express Productions.
Yes.
Did you join them after the fact, or is that a company that you've helped make? And I guess my main question is Pork Chop the name of a Chihuahua? Oh, oh, David, I think we've lost you. Well, folks, if you're hearing me live, it looks like we've lost David. We're going to try and get him back, or I'm lost. I'm not sure yet. We're going to find out. So let's see what's going on. We've lost David. All right, we're good. So here, folks, while we're waiting for David to come back, I'm going to show you this amazing shot of these Chihuahuas. So when I was reading the first issue of the book, I kind of expected a hokey horror story, which is what you get. I mean, it is hokey, but it's fun as hell. Oh, where is the shot? There. All right, share this tab instead. So it starts off with classic horror, young people being stupid, trying to have sex where they shouldn't. And that ends in this. And I love this shot dearly. More so than like the dog standing there with his eye and his mouth and these two. It's just all the eyes just looking at you from the desert. I'm in love with it. Yes, Daniel, the question did break him apparently. But so far, the first issue has been amazing. I read through it. I've started the second issue in prep for the interview. But as you can see, overall, the art is really solid. The storytelling is good. Like one thing that stood out to me was actually that these characters, they feel normal, if that makes sense. Like when you're reading them, the way that they're thinking to themselves, the way they talk to themselves when stuff goes wrong, just the series of events that leads up to everything, it actually feels like real. And as David was mentioning, he might have been prior to stream, but he mentioned that when he was inspired to write this, Resident Evil had been out, and that was a part of what inspired him. And so it definitely feels like a little bit of an early, look at sort of Resident Evil and what if it had been Chihuahuas. And I think that the way that they show movement, the way that the characters move, it definitely lines up with that. It kind of gives you that feel, which I think, one, good on the comic, good on David for writing it that way. But also it's interesting because a lot of comics that, especially recently, that I've interviewed folks about, have been inspired by Resident Evil, especially when the person who makes them is in about 30-ish. So it's just something interesting that I've noticed. Let's see if we can get David back, because I appreciate you can talk. you could listen to me talk all night, but it's nowhere near as interesting. Let's see here. Oh. He will be back shortly. Logging back in. But yeah, I'm actually going to totally shout out these covers. So when we've got the Shining cover, I'm not going to say that one. But I love this, the Chihuahuaning. The White Skull and Black Skulls look so good for issues 1 and 2 here. And again, you can grab these between 10 and $20 for the issues, just depending on what cover you go after. Welcome back, David. Oh, can you hear me?
Sorry about that. I have no idea what happened.
Yeah, these things happen. Not to worry.
All right.
Yeah,
it's technology is beautiful many times, and every now and then it bites you.
The irony, just like sometimes Chihuahuas. Oh, we may have a delay. We will find out.
Is it happening again?
I think it is, yeah.
Right. Okay, I'm seeing myself speaking and hearing the audio. Konrad, how are you doing? Let me see.
I'm doing good. How are you?
All right. I think it may have caught up to us now.
Good. That's good. Can you see me counting with my hands?
I apologize for this if this is on my end. Okay.
Maybe. I'm not sure. But that's all good.
All right. Check. Yeah.
That's coming in clear.
No problem. Am I coming through good now?
Yeah, I think there's a bit of a delay, but it's okay.
Yeah, we can work through it.
Absolutely. So David, I guess my next question
this site
for you
continues to give me a spinning circle.
Oh. Absolutely, Daniel. Absolutely. One of our
Chihuahuas are eating my internet. That's exactly what's happening. Yes.
They're coming for them, folks. Just like you should be coming for these books. David, earlier you mentioned that sort of one of your inspirations for the series was sort of Resident Evil. Can you talk about what version of Resident Evil sort of inspired it, and how that impacted writing the book?
Yeah, so I'm going to be showing my age here, but it was when this concept first started. Now it's been a little while, it's been a work in progress. We've been developing the story for more years than I care to admit. But the first video game that was out for the PlayStation that had the 2 discs, it was Leon on one and Claire on the other. Anybody who's read the comic book knows, like, the comic book starts off with a police officer named Leon who's driving into town on his first day, very much an homage to the start of Resident Evil, where Resident Evil Part 2. I have deviated from there. So it's not, you're not going to read this comic book and say, oh, it's just Resident Evil with Chihuahuas. It's very separate, but that starting point, a lot of writers, and I know I'm not alone in this, but sometimes it's like, if you're stuck on something, you take a concept and start with, like, well, what if it's this except this? And I think screenwriters are especially guilty of this, because producers and meetings and film execs are always like, well, we want something completely original, but we want it to be just like something that made tons of money for us recently. So give us that. And, it becomes ingrained in your brain. You're taught to constantly associate projects that you're working on with a successful entity that you're bringing a unique twist on. And so, especially at the time, with how deep in that process I was. It was like it's like Resident Evil, but with Chihuahuas. It's a simple pitch that you can do and gauge people's response pretty quickly.
And you know what? There's one thing I've noticed between, I'll say, successful and, I guess I don't want to say unsuccessful, because a lot of them have made it anyway, but quickly successful and comics that will be harder to become successful, is that ability to have that elevator pitch that's like, existing concept but with X becomes my thing, but we obviously run with it. So kudos, and I definitely get that
Thank
comes
you.
from, yeah, I think that comes from knowing the movie business, maybe. So another question that's come up for me previously with folks like yourself is, can you explain a little bit about what you do within the movie industry, or maybe it's TV industry, and how that impacts the way that you write this book compared to what you think someone else who's got no connection might do?
Yeah, I think having my soul crushed repeatedly has given me like no
Oh,
optimism or expectations of delivery. So the fact that like as you set about work and then something gets created, you're like, what? Like we're actually doing this? We're actually making making a book that people will be able to read. It's mind blowing. In all seriousness, I think having gone through like the storyboarding process, for instance, a comic book is so similar to a director's storyboards that I feel like when you're writing this with an eye towards how it's going to visually appear. And both comic books and film are both visual mediums. You're trying to tell a
mhm.
story through visuals as much as possible. And I am guilty of, as a writer, loving the dialogue and how much story I could pack into a panel. And working with a director and working with an artist are very similar in that both of them want to tell the story as much as they can just with their visuals. It's like, well,
Yeah.
your voice bubbles are getting in the way of my art. And is there a way, and that's been such a cool lesson of how can I tell this story using less of those voice bubbles? And I think had I had that experience going into film, I wonder how much of an impact that would have had on my earlier scripts and attempts at filmmaking. But I
Oh,
think bringing in that knowledge of to how to place action within a panel. So for instance, it's like talking about perspective because you're almost like the reader's perspective is almost like the camera's perspective in a movie, right? The
yeah.
camera is there for a reason. You're not just saying put a camera on a tripod and record action. You're saying the camera is here because we want this perspective. We want the characters arranged in this way to force the reader to focus on these elements or to symbolize this presentation. And it's it gets a little pretentious sometimes when you think about it that way, but it's a very cool way of visualizing and telling a story, not just through the words that the characters are saying and the exposition being presented, but also like what are you doing visually that's communicating elements to the reader. So
Beautiful. So I have to now be, you're what I'm loving about talking to you, David, is that you're extremely detailed in your answers.
no, thank you.
Yeah, it's fantastic. So my next question now is, for anyone out there, again, watching live with us or watching this in the future, um, can you explain from a writer's perspective how to write stuff like that? How to avoid putting too much dialogue that it will cover up art, or how to
Hmm.
even begin approaching a scene, um, that might have, like you said, 4 or 5 panels to it. Can you sort of talk about that?
Yeah. So the biggest thing when you're writing a comic book is, and you think about this when you're holding a comic book and you're reading a comic book, your eye, it immediately tracks almost to the bottom right corner, right? You're immediately like, okay, I'm going to get through this page, but what's going to happen? And so it's playing with that attention that the reader is going to have. It's like getting, okay, well, we think that this is coming. So when we turn the page, we want to make sure that we either elevate, twist it on its head, do something with that it's not just one panel, then this happens, then this happens, then this happens. It's
Okay.
like, you have to focus it on cause and effect throughout. And so when I'm laying that out, I'm trying to think there are going to be times, and my absolute favorite comic book author right now is James Tinian. the fourth,
Oh.
and he will pack like, I'm telling you, like, and I'll sit down with an artist, and the artist is like, we should only have a few panels because it gives us a chance to tell this, and then I like show him a page from Something's Killing the Children, and it's like, no, there's like 16 panels, and each panel is like just dialogue. So it's like there's people that will break it and they'll do it beautifully, but if you think about, like, the main purpose that somebody is going to open up the comic book, right, is because they were
Mhm.
drawn to the cover, the art on the cover, and then as they flip through it, it's like, how cool is this artwork? What's going on visually with this? And so, respecting both elements of it, because without, the writing is so important. I mean, and I say
Yeah.
that as a writer, but what the characters are saying, and what you're directing the story through on these panels, and it's just like paying attention to the cause of it. Okay, if it's a wide shot, if it's something that the reader is further back and they have to survey a whole great landscape, or a big like a big shot of something, then
Mhm.
yeah, you need to have that with minimal dialogue, because they're supposed to be focusing on these details. If you want the characters to appeal small, insignificant, unimportant, you want them to be small, and their dialogue should not be taking it up. But if you want an info dump, or if you want the character to be overwhelmed with information, and you want the reader to be like, I can't believe this is all happening, then there's obviously a reason for those panels to be smaller, because you're forcing the reader's eye, jumping more across, and it's more of a frantic, cluttered, almost claustrophobic feeling that the reader should have, which should match what the characters are feeling, versus, like I said, those wide open vistas, which is calm and it's peaceful, and you feel like you're in control in that situation. So I think it's just matching the tone of your project. We actually got into this with notes we had for an artist on one of the previous issues, where they were like, well, I feel like the page is getting cluttered. And my response to that was, it's supposed to be. It's supposed to be like a frantic these characters are like yelling at each other, back, back, back. Like, I don't want the reader to
Yeah.
calmly go through this. I want them to be feeling the same intensity that the characters have. And then once I said it that way, it clicked, and they were like, okay, it I don't know if they thought that it was like sloppy writing, or that there was no point to it. But when you can communicate the intent behind it, then it makes sense, and then it's like, okay, so it's like this for a reason, basically.
That that's so cool because like a big thing that I am a fan of, and I've talked many times on this, is leading the eye, especially when it comes to composition with comics. I think in no medium is it more important perhaps than comics, because you're not just going right like straight down. It's okay, usually it's let's bounce between, or some artists, Tinian himself has done this where he'll lead you like this through a page.
Hmm.
um so yeah, understanding that, understanding how you can crowd something with word bubbles, in order to make it feel claustrophobic, make it feel quick, snappy. Yeah, it's just a cool thing that I think comics are beautiful for, because there's such a dynamic way to show what you want to show, that you could pick 10 artists and get 10 very different ways that these scripts could appear on page.
Yeah.
um, yeah, it's just the coolest thing. I guess uh, the flip side of the coin is now, so there's 4 issues out in total. You've just finished a Backstarter, as we were talking sort of before going live. You shipped them all, so folks will be getting their issue 4 or 1 through 4 or whatever they've missed soon, which is awesome. Um, when it comes to the flip side, now that you've written 4 issues, have you found that that experience has changed how you will write a scene for film, or how you think about film production?
Yes, yes, absolutely. It's definitely had an impact as I go back, and I'm still working on some screenplays as well for features, and writers are on strike, so we're not working with any signatories of the American Motion Picture and Television Producers, but it's still an opportunity for us to continue to work on our own ideas. The lessons I've
Mm.
learned from comic book writing have been invaluable for sure, as far
Oh,
as
cool.
thinking about, once again, driving things visually, thinking about the use of dialogue, because sometimes I've even thought, you put a dialogue bubble on the page, and you're like, it's taking up it's cluttering this panel just a little bit too much for my liking. It's forcing me to okay, I've got 3 sentences. Can I tell this in two? And it almost feels like, this
Oh,
is a lesson that I should have already known. I mean, I've been doing this long enough, but in practice, actually doing it instead of in theory learning about it or discussing it, but just going through and figuring out what's the fewest lines of dialogue I can use to convey this, it's forcing me to think way more creatively and, come up with solutions that are great because writing is a lot of problem solving, right? It's a lot of writing yourself into a corner and figuring out what do the characters do that got me into this situation, and then you know being as creative as possible to get them out and yourself out as a writer of getting into any kind of a jam. So it's been a lot of fun, just working different creative muscles, but in at the end of the day, it's all writing, it's all being creative, and following your characters and trusting your characters because you've developed your characters enough to make the right choices, kind of thing.
I love it. Uh, now we're 31 minutes in like 3 seconds time. Eh, for the folks out there, I'm gonna pop up the store back up on screen here. Um, let the folks know where they can find you. How can they follow you? How can they get your books currently? What's the best way to support you? All that stuff. Selfish promotion time. Go for it.
Cool, thank you so much. I always tell people, it is free to share our content. It is free to go to our Instagram, Night of the Chihuahuas. We're on Facebook, Night of the Chihuahuas. Help us out. A share means the world. Telling a friend about what you saw here means everything, and it's free. We understand that times are tough financially for a lot of people. We are a boutique comic book, and so we're not able to charge $5 for a print because it costs us a lot more than it costs Marvel or DC or Image to print a comic book. So, the $10 price point. We've been at enough shows where people are like, it's a little bit of money, and we're like, yeah, we know we're small print press. It's like it costs us a lot. If you can't afford a comic book and you want to pick one up, we're at nightofthechihuahuas.com. He's got the website up there as well, and it's got all of our prints. You can find us across gosh, I think we're in like 44 stores across the US and Canada right now. In Canada, we are only at the moment, we're only in Vancouver. So we're trying to expand more. But if you reach out to us, and if you have a friendly local comic book shop that does not have our book, you can ask them to order it from us. We work with dealers all the time. So website is the easiest one. We're at shows. We're going to be this year, we're going to be in Detroit, and that's the furthest we've strayed from our home base of Arizona. So
Oh,
Detroit and El Paso, which is in Texas, and Boise, Idaho. Those are going to be the three, like, getting, because normally we just do Arizona and California shows, and
fair.
this is going to be a nice way to kind of branch out, and then hopefully we just continue to build and build and build.
For the folks who might want to come meet you in person, pick up their books and get them signed, what is the next convention that you're going to, and do you know the date?
I'm going to be a guest at the LA Comic Con, which is the first weekend of December. I believe it's the first through third. So I'm very proud to have been invited to be a guest there, and I'm really looking forward to it. We did the show last year, and it was an amazing time. And this year, it's looking to be even bigger because with the SAG strike, they just signed a release or an agreement that says that actors can promote at the LA Comic Con. So they're expecting a pretty big turnout, and we're hoping that
Oh,
rising tide floats all boats kind of thing, and really looking forward to getting out there and meeting people and just having a great time.
that's so cool. I'm glad to hear that they've come
Hmm.
up with an agreement, because I definitely know that for Fan Expo, which is 2 weeks from now, I think, here in Toronto, there was a lot of sort of rumbling from people like, we have actors coming. Can they actually be here? Oh, they can be here. Okay, cool. Can they sign autographs? Can they sell like, where were the lines being drawn there?
Yeah.
So I'm glad to hear at least stuff is getting worked on so that people can make money at cons, the fans can enjoy. Um, and I hope you have a hell of a time.
Thank you. Oh, I'll be remiss without saying Motor City Comic Con is actually the previous month. That one is going to be, we don't have that one locked down yet, but keep an eye on our socials because we'll be announcing that one. That's going to be like November. It's Veterans Day weekend in the United States, which is the second week in November. So
Very cool. If you're watching Motor City Comic Con,
yep.
bring David
In
on. Do it.
Detroit. So check us out.
Perfect. Now, I have to ask. Um, Normally, my show, people are supporting a Kickstarter. Yours is already successful. As you've sort of mentioned, um, you're on to a fifth printing for your first issue. You're in many locations. You're in a store in Vancouver, so you're international now, which is amazing. Um, I've definitely got to ask, like, when it comes to the fan reaction, um, how have you felt about it? Has there been anything that's shocked you? Anything like that?
I have been shocked at the number of people who aren't necessarily comic fans that still buy our book because of the content. We
Oh,
One of my favorite stories that I always tell people is like we were at a horror show, which we were like one of only a handful of comic book vendors there. A lot of other people were selling horror movie related stuff, and we had our comic books. And this lady walked by and she came back to our table and she bought like 6 copies, and she said she was a animal control officer, and she hates Chihuahuas, and all of her coworkers hate Chihuahuas, and she was going to hand these out. And I just thought that was like the funniest thing. Of we get things like that. We get people who walk by and they're like, "Oh my god, my nana has a Chihuahua and I hate that thing. I'm going to buy a copy and give it to her." Or we have people buy prints because they just love Chihuahuas. They don't necessarily want, and kind of what you said earlier, they didn't buy a copy of the comic book, but they love the prints. They bought a few prints and they wanted to hang them up. And we have a veterinarian who has like 5 of our posters up in their office. So it's really funny to me. And I love, there's no type of like bad attention that we can get. I always tell people if they're like, I'm going to give this to my cousin, but, he hates Joel so much, he'll probably scream and throw it away. I'm like, I don't want to sound insensitive, but I got your money. You can do whatever you want with that comic book. Like as soon as you bought it from me, whatever you do with it is up to you. But the fact that, you know, they might tell somebody else about it and then that leads to another fan of ours. It is all good. And I love talking to people at conventions and fans fusions where, they don't, even if they don't buy a comic book, they see our art and they want to come by and tell me about their Chihuahua, or they want to show me a picture of their, a Chihuahua that they know and stuff. And it's so much fun. And there's so much negative, and not to get all woo woo, but there's so much negative energy in this world right now. And the fact that like, somebody walks by our booth and points and laughs at our thing and they get a good, they're like, "Oh my gosh, look at that killer Chihuahuas. That's hilarious." And they keep walking because it's not necessarily something that they're into, but they think it was funny. I
yeah.
love it. Absolutely love it. And just, the thought that we are brightening somebody's day, or, serving a very niche market, which we understand it's a boutique comic book. It's not for everybody. It's not supposed to be. Art is not supposed to be for everybody. But we are creating fans, and we're building our fan base through word of mouth. We've never hired a marketer. We've never hired any kind of professional team.
So
It's
cool.
just been word of mouth. People telling each other, people telling friends and family about what we're doing, and it's growing organically. And when it grows organically, it doesn't mean it grows fast, but it does grow, and it's been a blast. It really has.
That's so good. That makes me happy, David. Thank you.
Thank you,
Uh,
Conrad.
then another thing I'll ask, because you have, and I got to bring them up because they're so cool. You have so many different covers, different inspirations: The Shining, Jaws, um, Gojira. I want to say this is Biggie Smalls, but I don't know enough of
It
the
is. It
rap.
is. Yep.
Thank you. Okay, I'm not doing bad. This feels like Night of the Living Dead or Walking Dead. Um, you have so many variant covers, and
Yeah.
often when it comes to variants, I don't believe artists or writers generally have a hard time finding a variant cover to be done. Um, but often I find the struggle is if they find an artist that they want to do a cover with, and they have something in mind for them. Usually it's a problem of like, oh, schedule doesn't work right now. I can't because of X. Hit me up next month or something. Um, Given that boutique, that a little out to left field, off the wall sort of nature of this book, um, have you ever had an issue with people being like, "Yes, I will do a cover for you"? And what sort of the artist's response has been to the concept?
At first, we were definitely, we were fortunate enough to where we already had existing relationships with a few artists that when we created this
Oh,
project, we were able to sort of lean on the friends that we had. And then as this project is growing, we've been very active here in the local community in Phoenix with the comic book artists locally, and making a lot of friends. And we're actually having artists come to us now, which is awesome. And that's, doesn't mean that we're like the popular kid at school where we could pick and choose, but it's just being able to line up with like people whose interests align with ours, because it's, wanting to make sure that we're respecting, you know, I don't want to say the brand because that sounds really pretentious and capitalistic, but like, what we're doing is, we have something, that a story that we're telling, and we want all the art to kind of fit that what we're doing already.
Yes.
And so it's like artists who align with what we're trying to do versus somebody who's just coming in for a cash grab. And we're fortunate enough to where we made enough friends, and we have developed enough of a positive reputation where artists want to come work with us and partner with us, and it's been awesome. And we've made tons of new friends along the way, and hoping to continue these very successful relationships going forward as well.
I dig it. That is so good. I had a feeling you had people reaching out to you because it's one of those concepts that's just like, it's fun. By God, it's fun. It's a little ridiculous. One thing I do want to ask about those, you've mentioned you have worked a part of a Chihuahua rescue. I guess, are you still actively doing that? What did that or does that involve? And can you speak about some of like the good things about Chihuahuas? If people like myself who frankly don't have enough experience with them, like tell me all about it. What's up with that?
Yeah. So you have, it's something that you have to keep in mind, is that Chihuahuas are two things. They're very small dogs. They're pack animals. They form a pack with and they don't form a pack with other dogs necessarily, but they form.
Oh, we may have lost him again. Let's see. Oh, I want to know this so bad. Yes, Daniel, I have seen a lot of folks out of Phoenix very suddenly kind of coming up with really cool comments, by the way. Yeah. Well, folks, in the comments, I appreciate currently David's a little frozen. What do you think of the book so far? Is it something you would want to read? Is it something you think you would buy just straight up for a cover? Because these covers, again, like I love them. I want to see this one actually. Let me blow it up for you guys at home. Like that is a wild cover. Yeah, let me know in the comments. Like, what do you think? Is this just a weird, kitschy thing that you enjoy? Is it something that you would want to chase after? Oh, here we go. I think that looks sick. Like that could be a really cool tattoo for someone that likes Chihuahuas. Then the matching issue number 2. Like that could go nicely up on the wall back here. Beefy here is fabulous. Having read issue 1, seeing this is awesome. Like it already gives me ideas of what's happening with issue 2. God, come on, you gotta love these covers. I appreciate the Virgin variants as well. We've got Godzilla. We've got Biggie. Oh, it's almost like a Left 4 Dead thing. Okay. Oh, very cool. We've got a cover for Last of Us. Just gross. Absolutely gross. And then they got posters of, I think, everything. Oh, I've got way too many things up here. There we go. Godzilla. Black, white. Yeah. And the t-shirt. I love that, actually. That's really cool. So yeah, like let me know what you think of the comments. Is this something that it's a little too weird to want to buy it? Is it definitely up your alley? I can vouch the first issue is really good. I've started digging into the second one and I quite like it. But it's definitely a weird and yet lovable thing. But yes, I am also very much, well, I'm not afraid of Chihuahuas. I just don't generally like them because my experience has been poor. And also in the comments, let me know, is your history with Chihuahuas, is it positive? Have you known Chihuahuas and you're like, they're fantastic? Or have you, like myself, not had maybe the best ones ever? Let me know what you think. I'm very interested to see. I will. Let's see if I can't bring up that number one again. Just while we wait for David to hop back on. There we go. And again, this is the 5th printing. So the fact that they've gone to 5 printings for issue 1 already is amazing. They're in, they said, multiple stores throughout the States and in Vancouver. And they work with folks. So if you're out there watching, whether it's live now with us or if you're watching this in the future, hello from the past. You know what? Go to your local store, hit them up, ask them about bringing this in. I'm sure they will bring it to you. Like I said earlier, this issue starts with young people trying to have sex where they probably shouldn't be, and they get very dead for it. And then we have Leon introduced, a la Resident Evil references here. And it's creepy. And I love the fact it's almost an homage to The Walking Dead. Yes, for those of you watching, if you're not aware, The Walking Dead with Rick Grimes and all them, it is a comic first. It's a good comic, actually. Go get that. It's all black and white. And this comic, likewise, very much so follows that feeling. And I think in a horror comic, it really adds a lot. I don't know exactly what it is. I think it's a mood thing personally. I think being able to just have heavy blacks like this to show sort of intensity adds a lot. That's kind of what I think it is. So yeah, absolutely, you're going to want to enjoy this. And let's flip back because welcome back, David.
I don't know what's happening. I'm sorry.
It's all good. Tech issues happen. You might experience a bit of a delay. I noticed last time you hopped back on, we had a bit of a delay and then it caught up. So not to worry there.
Cool. Yeah. Thanks for your patience. I apologize. Cool. I was gonna say it is currently like 110 degrees here, so I think the heat is just.
Wow. That's hot. Oh my God, that is hot.
Yeah, and the low is like 90 degrees. Is 90 degrees right now at night. It is miserable, absolutely miserable. But I am cursing all of my ancestors who established roots here. I'm like, California was 5 hours that way. You guys couldn't have kept going. They were like, no, it's too hot. We're just going to wait for it to cool down. And it never did.
Oh my God. You know what? I've experienced that before too with folks who are in like the southern states that get heat issues and sort of bugging the tech. These things happen. But yes, David,
Yeah.
I've been talking up your comic. But
Oh,
I want to know, I want to know, tell me about the dog rescue. Tell me about your experiences with Chihuahuas. You started mentioning they're pack animals. They form packs with not just dogs, but whomever they're sort of with. Elaborate. What's going on?
Yeah, so I mean, that's why, like the most vicious dog I ever owned, her pack with me. She had bonded with me. I think they call it imprinted. She imprinted on me, even though she was already old when I adopted her, or rescued her.
Okay.
But then, she established her pack with. All right, there we go. We're back.
Oh,
So they are mean. They're as mean as they are because they're as small as they are. And so I think it's just having people understand that they are protecting themselves. They're terrified of being stepped on. They're terrified of of everything else that looms above them, and just respecting that and understanding that, getting down to their level whenever possible, hands on the floor, flat hands to feed them, things like that, and respecting that they are the size that they are, but they are the most affectionate dogs when you have worked with them, when you can socialize them. Unfortunately, with the small
Oh.
dog rescue that I worked with, unfortunately, I haven't been able to for a while just because of time constraints. But we still support them financially, and we did we have 2 rescues right now, and one of them was through them. It was a little Chihuahua, and then it became the fattest dog I've ever met. And I'll see if I can get him in here to show you how fat he got. But not we put him on a diet, we exercise him. He's just a thick boy. I always tell people to stop body shaming him. But the Chihuahuas they're very resilient, obviously, because they're the number one street dog here in Phoenix. There's tons of them in the wild, feral dogs that have never been anyone's pet because they just
Oh.
bond together. There's like 20 of them at a time, and they'll be running through the street, chasing people off the sidewalk. They actually did a news story about it here, which helped us out because we used that for our publicity.
Nice. That's fascinating.
Yeah. So I have a pit bull and a Chihuahua right now, and the pit bull, when guests come over, we just tell people like, give her a few minutes, and but within a few minutes, she thinks she's a lap dog. She's like 80 pounds of muscle, and she's crawling up on people on the couch trying to get them to pet her. And the Chihuahua is just, he needs to have time. You need to give him time. You can't rush him. He will come up to you when he's ready, kind of thing.
That's fascinating. So, and again, like we talked about earlier, I love larger breed dogs. Rottweiler's my favorite. I know them to be giant teddy bears, and anyone who really knows them will agree. And so when someone who's like, oh, I'm afraid of Rottweilers or big dogs like that, I'm like, oh, so here's some tips that I use to get the dogs to relax, and then just sort of be around you without being an issue. And then if you want to pet them, cuddle them, go for it. What would you say are some of your tips for folks who want to, better their relationship with their aunt's Chihuahua who hates them, or their, girlfriend's mom's dog that wants to rip their face? Like, how would you better your relationship with the Chihuahua?
So exposure and patience. The dog is not going to, if it's only seeing you for a few minutes and then you leave, it's not going to get used to you. The dog has to earn trust, and that trust is earned through exposure. So once it understands that the threat is not there, that you are not a threat to it, then it will start to warm up to you. But it won't think that you're not a threat until it's been around you long enough to determine that. So food motive
Oh.
most Chihuahuas are food motivated, so you can, just be easy on they have weeks. Most of the ones I've worked with have weak stomachs, so be careful with what you're feeding it. But usually, like little
Oh.
treat, dog approved treats are fine. Just people food, they tend to have weak stomachs on. Uh, Work with that little by little, but let them come to you. Basically, if you find time to just sit there with a treat in your hand and give that dog as much time as it needs to finally come to you, if you force it, it will immediately react negatively because it thinks you're going to step on it.
Oh.
It thinks you're going to attack. So you coming after it, even if you have a treat in your hand and you're being nice, the dog, you're a threat to that dog. So you need to sit in a place where the dog feels comfortable approaching you. Let the dog have as much time as it needs. And that's not an easy thing to do, and that's why a lot of people don't do it. A lot of people are like, well, no, I want it to be, I want it to happen in 15 minutes. It's not going to. It takes a long time to,
Mhm.
especially a dog that's been feral, that's coming in off the streets. It takes a really long time to rehabilitate them and to socialize them around people. And not that doesn't mean that you're going to have a great relationship with it, but hopefully it tolerates you at least.
Yeah, that's one thing that I think whenever I'm dealing with someone who's not sure about pets or has a some sort of negative reaction with an animal, I'm like, don't make your goal to be best friends with them. Make your goal to cohabitate well with them, right? Just
Yep.
be able to be around them with no issue.
Yeah.
Like me personally, I don't like cats. I think they're too smart. I think they're constantly planning how to kill me. But I can at least go and learn how to be in the same space with them and not have any issues.
hmm
That's fascinating though. But thank you for the tips, because it's definitely, as someone who loves dogs, and there's tons of them out there. I'm sure people watching love dogs. But I sort of unilaterally, everyone that I know typically has a story about like a crazy Chihuahua, but it's getting that perspective from someone who understands them and has had that time around them. I appreciate it. So it's just
Yeah.
basically let them come to you. That can take a long time.
Yep. You
Go
have to earn their
slow.
trust.
Yeah,
It
I
took so
dig
when
it.
we first got Coco, she was we got her, she was already an old dog. She was already like 12 years old. We had her for like another 6 years after that. And it took a couple months when we first got her to, because she had been living with my nana who had just kept her outside. She was an outside dog. It took a long time to get her used to the fact that, hey, you're safe in this house. We are here, we're your family kind of thing. And it was worth it because she was still to this day like my favorite dog I've ever had. But it was work, and I mean, that's life, life relationships are work, and
Yeah,
you have to continue to put the time in and invest, and it's so beneficial, though the rewards are way worth it.
that's amazing. Now, it, my math might be wrong, but I'm pretty good at math. You mentioned 12-year-old dog had them for 6 more years. That would be an 18-year-old dog.
Yep. She was pure white by the end, and like the poor thing, her bones were very rickety and blind, and most of her teeth had fallen out by the end. But she lived, I always think to myself, like, she had such a rough 12 years leading up to us getting her. And then once we had her, she had like 6 years of just being pampered and, eating good food and sleeping in beds and inside and, doing all the things that she deserved throughout the years. So we made it
Amazing.
up to her.
Hell yeah. No, like that's one thing. My family all my life has got dogs from the pound as opposed to breeders and stuff.
Good.
Basically
I'm
for
glad to
that
hear that.
reason, right?
Mhm.
Now I do want to ask, for someone out there maybe who started watching this stream because it's a funny Chihuahua book, but has maybe gone like, oh, you know, it'd be interesting to have one. Um, are Chihuahuas typically like? Do they typically live that long? Is that an exception to the rule?
That was
Um,
definitely an exception. They're typically about 12 to 15 years old.
oh, that's
Of
still
course,
damn.
God forbid something happens and they die sooner than that. But small breed dogs are typically going to live longer, and Chihuahuas, especially rescues, are typically not full bred dogs or purebred dogs. Purebred dogs are going to have a shorter life
Mhm.
expectancy than mixed breeds or mutts, and so Coco was definitely like, I think she was like uh, Chihuahua, and we guessed like a mini pin because of the shape of her snout and stuff, but it still looked like, mostly a Chihuahua.
Yeah, that's cool. So basically, if someone goes out after this, feeling very inspired and very patient, gets themselves a Chihuahua, they very well might have it for 10 to 15 years. That's incredible.
Yep. And always remember too, when you're adopting a dog, you're adopting a living creature that you should be assuming care for. They're not a toy, they're not a prop, they're not, a gimmick. So you make sure that if you are going to adopt, and we hope that you do adopt, take the time or understand that this is a partner for the rest of its life.
Beautiful. We've gotten a little bit away from the comic itself, but
Oh
thank you
yeah.
for indulging me. Um, Given a little earlier, you mentioned that basically the sort of the super version of the elevator pitch is Resident Evil plus Chihuahuas. Um, when you're at cons and you're explaining the book to people that are willing to listen to a little more than the 4 seconds it takes to say that, um, how would you explain this book to someone who's watching who maybe wants to go and pick it out? What can they look forward to um, beyond just the concept?
Yeah, it's a campy horror comedy that's basically an homage to all the monster movies that I grew up watching in my misspent youth. I grew up Saturday mornings watching Monster, or Saturday nights watching Monster Vision on TNT, and just like all the creature features. And so it's a lot of these tropes that we're familiar with from these movies. And I've just having some fun with it by putting in, instead of a monster, it's killer chihuahuas. But there's still a lot of other elements that you'll recognize. There's the scientist whose work may or may not be responsible. Spoiler alert, it is. There's the shady small town politicians who are in cahoots with everything, and there's the tough guys, the cowards, all these tropes that you should be familiar with. And instead of just trotting them out for the same old, it's we're trying to put a new humorous spin on it via our creatures. So it's lighthearted. It doesn't take itself too seriously. Um, I, I think it's a blast. Obviously, it's definitely, as I said before, not for everyone. If you're not into creature features, if you're not into horror, campy horror, might not be for you, and that's fine. But I hope that you'll give it a shot.
Awesome. Thank you for that beautiful description. Um, Given the campy nature of it, I often find folks like to hide stuff, and I love asking comic creators and writers, um, have you implanted yourself, friends, references, maybe a favorite poster, books, um, dogs that you've known in this case? Have you implanted stuff like that in the book that people that maybe know you will find, or just people who know pop culture might find?
Oh yeah, oh yeah. There's well, like, I mean, just so the Resident Evil homage comes from not only the name of the main character is Leon, but also the if you when he shows up, he's like talking about how he had been on the phone with Chief Irons earlier. So it's like the Resident Evil thing. The character Johnny, who is like the big crazy hillbilly in this, he's based on one of my best friends and he knows it too. He's very well aware of it. He thinks it's hilarious. My friends that I've kind of modeled these characters off of a little bit, they all know it and they all think it's hilarious. The iFit Corporation is one that I'm going to keep a secret because
Oh, yeah, please do.
some people know why I named it iFit, and I will reveal at some point to the general public, but like it's one of my favorite little Easter eggs of like, well, everybody's always like, iFit, what does it stand for? Does it stand for anything? I'm like, yeah, it does. They're like, well, what does it stand for? Like, it's that's something I'm gonna keep
Interesting.
because it's the dumbest thing in the world, and I hope nobody thinks that it's anything serious. But when they find out, they're just gonna be like, "Are you kidding me?" People who know me will not be surprised. But it's set in Arizona. I mean, I grew up, born and raised in Arizona. I moved around a lot. I went to school in Indiana, lived in Los Angeles for a long
Oh,
time. But I've always wanted to be like, Stephen King sets everything in Maine because that's where he's from. He loves it. He knows it. I've always wanted to set things in Arizona for the same reason. The state
oh.
has a lot to complain about. There's a lot wrong with living here. With why would anybody establish a city in the middle of a desert? But this is my home, and there's a lot of things here that I think would make for very good story ideas. And I'm going to continue to set my projects here unless the story requires they be set elsewhere. So, yeah, lots of little inside jokes like that.
That's the best. I love that kind of stuff. I I think one of the last ones, just because it's Resident Evil ish. I was interviewing a person, and oh, I feel so horrible. I can't remember the name. I'm horrible with names, by the way, David.
Yeah, it's all good.
Um, they'd written a comic, and it again very inspired by Resident Evil. And they literally had hidden in it. There's a room that the characters take uh, a rest in, and it's got a typewriter and it's got a plant with these big leaves in it.
Oh,
And
nice.
they were like it's a
Green herb.
blatant exactly. They're like it's a blatant rip. It's meant to homage it, and I love that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's the greatest. Now, one important question. You've done multiple successful Kickstarters. As mentioned, you shipped them off. Fantastic. So there's 4 issues currently. Um, is Night of the Chihuahuas first arc complete? Is there more to come in this first story? What can fans expect?
Yeah, so the story arc is going to conclude with the 5th issue. So anybody who's read the first 4 issues, they know that issue number 4 is quite the cliffhanger, leaves our heroes in a precarious situation. If you know story structure, then you know that that's basically the end of our second act. It's like issue number 5 is going to be our climactic finale, the craziest issue that we've had so far. Everything's going to come to a head, and then I have plans for additional story arcs. The sequel is going to be called Chihuahuas from Hell, but we are we're going to take a little break. I've got a couple other projects I've been contracted to do, and I love this story. I want to continue to follow the characters, but we want to make sure that there appears to be an audience for it, and we would love to continue to grow that. The sequel is bigger because sequels are always bigger, right? Sequels, you got to go bigger. You got to give the audience more of what they love with it, and I would really excited about where that's going to take us. But this storyline with these initial characters is going to resolve after issue 5. Our artist is just finished. Is sending over issue or page 9. It's going to be 24
Oh,
pages, just like issue 4 was. So, gosh, man, we're looking at sometime in October having a completed one done, and then we're going to roll out the Kickstarter to help us cover printing and shipping.
so in 2 months' time, the next chunk should be ready.
Yep, yep, and then that'll be it, and then we'll do a trade paperback collecting all 5 issues, and man, it feels good to say that. When we first started this, a lot of things we were learning. We learned a lot, and we were
Mhm.
learning as we went. So for a while, it was like, man, are we going to finish this thing? But I have always, and I know people who have done projects that unfortunately just kind of died. And I know
Yep.
that there's lots of reasons for it. It's not because of incompetence. It's not because of lack of talent or lack of passion. There's so many external factors working against you every step of the way in the creative process. And so, we're not there yet, but we're almost there. And man, it's going to feel good to be able to finish one.
Good. I'm glad to hear it. I'm glad you're excited and that it's going to be done soon. Um, uh, Normally, I end my interviews with two main questions. We're at an hour and 5 now, so it's a good time to end it. But just for the folks tuning in, again, whether they're tuning in live or watching this in the future, if they missed it, what is the best place people can follow you? How can they best support you currently? Let them know.
Yeah. So I most active on I'm pretty bad at social media, I'll be honest. If you follow me, you'll probably be like, "Is this guy still alive? Do something." I don't I don't post nearly as much as I should, but I'm most active right now on Instagram, and it's just the spelling of my name, David Quiroz Jr., but all in one word. So David
Oh, okay.
Quirozjr. You can also find me on Twitter. Well, I have a Twitter account, but I haven't used it in like a year. So the same thing, spelling of my name. Uh, on Twitter, I kind of left there. I started with Blue Sky, but it doesn't seem like Blue Sky is really doing much yet. So you could find me once again spelling my name on there as well. And I do not have Facebook or Discord or Snapchat or any of that other stuff. So, and then as far as the comic book itself, like I said, we're on Instagram, Facebook. I do not run the social media, so if you're contacting that's going to be Nathan Price, who is the head of Pork Chop Express. He runs the social media for Chihuahuas on both Instagram and Facebook. And like I said, I mean, it's free to tell your friends about it. It's free to share our posts, to like our posts, to do things like that. I mean, we understand not everybody can financially reach out and buy a copy, but
Mhm.
if you tell people what you've seen here, if you think that there's somebody who would love it, please let them know. Help us out. I mean, independent art is a grind, and we are creating something that we think brings some happiness into this crazy universe that we live in, and definitely really value everybody's support, and really thank you for having me on and giving me a chance to tell everybody about this. We always say, spreading the gospel of the killer chihuahuas, and thank you for helping us and participating in that.
Absolutely, David. It has been a joy having you on. I am going to throw up the link to your website so people can go if they wish to buy them, whether the issues or just the posters, whatever makes them happy. You've seen it here, folks. Go follow that link, punch it into your Chrome browser or Safari, whatever you use, and enjoy. So, David, my last two questions I always ask folks. Um, Generally, I shift them around, but generally speaking, are the same two things. So the first one I'll ask you is, um, people who create, specifically people who create comics, they're often nerds. They are often collectors. Whether it's comics, books, some sort of memorabilia, help sports cards, jerseys, whatever. Um, they're always collecting something. Just from your office in there, I could see you've got a pretty cool collection. Um, One thing I like to ask is, of all the things in your collection, um, what is the one thing that, and maybe not the most expensive, maybe not the most rare, but what's the thing that brings you the most joy?
Whew, that's a tough one, man. I am going to go with I did not sell my PlayStation 2 despite my wife's very, very, very vigorous attempts to get me to clear space. And I just say, honey, This was the first when I moved out when I graduated college. The first time, I grew up not rich, let's just say that. And so I never owned a video game system until I graduated college and I bought myself a PS2, and it was a very proud moment. First game I bought for that was Silent Hill 2. Silent Hill 2
Oh,
remains my absolute favorite video game ever produced, and I own the original copy of it. And that
oh,
thing's
damn.
going for hundreds of dollars right now on eBay, which blows my mind. I'm like, really? And to the point where I've thought about selling it, but I won't,
Mm.
because I love that video game so much. And you can't on the PS5, you can't, which I've got a PS5 now, you can't play it online anymore. So having a PS2, having Silent Hill 2, being able to recreate for creative purposes, I don't play video games on my computer, because if I have Steam on my computer, I'm not going to get any writing done, period. I barely get any writing done as it is. And if I have the option of firing up Silent Hill on my computer, that's all I'll do. So I don't have Steam on my computer, hence so I can't play Silent Hill 2 unless I have the original version. And so
Wow.
being able to have held on to it for so long, I mean, the game means a lot to me, not just because it's brilliant, but because of what it stands for, the time in my life that I acquired it,
Mhm.
how much it meant to me, like really solidified, like this is what I want to write. I want to write horror that matters, horror that tells a bigger story, horror that is symbolizes something bigger than ourselves, kind of thing, which Silent Hill 2 very much does.
Oh,
And
yeah.
yeah, so for me, it's like that's definitely the collectible that I've held on to that I'm the most proud of. Besides that, I think some of my I used to be a huge Punisher fan, but that's taken on a very different connotation in recent years. So some of those old Punishers that I still have, not nearly as, even though they're sentimental because I acquired them over years. Back in those days before they had eBay and stuff, when I was a kid, it was like hunting them down at comic book shops and like trading with,
Yeah.
I was like, oh man, I've got like 5 Wolverines I'll give you for that one Punisher, because I really wanted to be a completist and get all of them. Um, and plus, dude, it's like, getting to meet Jim Lee and just like tell him, like, dude, you're the
Hell
Punishers that
yeah.
you illustrated. I grew up with those, and like they were so influential to me and stuff like that. So
That's fantastic. Um, I love asking that question because so many people give me so many different varied answers, and I love hearing about it. Um, I am curious. The PS2 that you have, is it still the original one that you bought? And
yeah,
wow, is it the brick
I'm
or is it the
actually
slim?
no, it's a slim. I'm looking at it right now. It's a slim with the pop-up lid on it. So yep.
Nice. I love it. And I guess I'll ask you my last question, David, which is simply, who do you think I should interview next?
They are, gosh, man, I know some really, really, really talented artists. If you're looking for an artist, there's a cat named John Yerkeba who is insanely talented, and he's done a lot of stuff for like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, which movie just came out. He also has worked on a lot of IDW stuff.
Oh,
I put him. I would recommend him. Man, I'm gonna piss some people off because I'm not saying their names, and I can't. I mean, like my brain is just a little fried right now, but.
yeah.
Uh, there is a lot of really talented local Arizona artists that I think would definitely have something to say and be entertaining to your guests and to yourself as well. And man, if I could think of some more, don't yell at me, everybody. I'm sorry that I forgot your name. I just talked to John recently, so he's top of mind. So if you wanted to be top of mind, you should have talked
Perfect.
to me. So
And do me a favor, spell John's last name for me if you can.
Yurcab is in Bravo A.
Other than the R, I actually had it correct.
Oh,
Awesome.
cool. Okay. Yeah,
Well,
really good
thank you.
dude. Super nice guy, super personable. And then yeah, see, like I said, man, I'm gonna Tone Rodriguez if you haven't had him on yet. Thanks a lot, Daniel. Appreciate it. Tone Rodriguez is a really great dude as well, and I've had the great pleasure of working with him lately on some projects, and very knowledgeable and very giving person who's taught me. I think working with him, I've learned more about comic book writing than I had known previous. Like in the
Interesting.
short time that I've had the fortune of working with him, learned so much.
Right on. And Tone, Ton?
Tone.
Oh, okay. And then Rodriguez with this typical spelling?
You got it.
I will look them up. Thank you so much, David.
Yeah, yeah. Let them know, and I can reach out as well. Just give them a heads up that you might be hitting them up.
I would love that. Thank you.
Yeah,
Um,
definitely.
yeah, and absolutely. Once more, thank you so much for taking the time to come on the show. It was much appreciated and very fun.
Heck yeah! Thanks a lot for having me on, Conrad. I really apologize for my technical glitches. It was definitely on my end because I had to actually do a hard reboot on my computer both times. So it
Oh,
was me. I'm going to blame the heat. I apologize for
yeah,
that. But thanks for having me on, man. This is a great conversation, and thanks everybody for stopping by and hanging out with us.
absolutely. And as David said, for the folks at home, comment down below what you think of David, what you think of the book, because it's amazing. Follow the links, go pick it up, please. And we will see you next time.
Thanks a lot.
Golden age to present, digest to oversize. Never miss new comic day. Yeah, no surprise. So where's my no prize? Check the letter columns. Can't find issue 2. Collect a